You're listening to Codepunk with Bill Ahern and Michael Zuhl, a podcast about the intersection between programming, technology, and the digital lifestyle.
Hey, Michael, how you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, man. Kids they seem to go down within 15 minutes of laying them down. So like when we started recording tonight, they seemed like they were wide awake. So I figured, okay, there's definitely going to be a little bit of screaming. You're going to hear my wife scream over the phone for them to lay down, but doesn't seem to be too much of that going on. So they're adjusting much more comfortably to being in their toddler beds, which is, I'm thankful for. We took them to the carnival the other day, and my son screamed every time you went to try to put him on a ride, and then my daughter screamed every time you tried to take her off of a ride. So we got it both ways there. We have one that loves to be on every ride but will never want to get off, and then another one who likes to be in front of the rides and see them go but doesn't actually want to sit on one and go with it.
That's funny. So you're getting it coming and going. Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, life with twins is interesting. I mean, it's interesting, and then you get to see all these things that are developing around them. And I mean, the fact that they're 2.5 years old, but they know how to turn phones on. My son takes a bunch of photos of his feet when my wife's not looking. So she goes and logs into her phone. It's out of memory. And all you see is a bunch of camera shots of my son's toes because he's been playing with everything.
Is he doing that on purpose? Like he wants to see pictures of his feet?
He knows, not that he wants to see pictures of his feet. It's that he knows what buttons to press to unlock her phone, and he knows what buttons to press to get to the camera. And he likes to see himself in the camera. And so depending on what angle it is, it's interesting to see how quickly, I mean, when they were just, before they were even kind of learning to speak, they were just kind of walking around. I mean, they would make noises, but they, like, Dorian wouldn't have all of his words. You might know like 5 or 6 of them. Well, one of them was very close to Xbox because he got so used to us saying Xbox on that he knew that Xbox on meant the television was going to come on. So you would see him sometimes run up to the television screen and try to mouth words, and he's trying to turn the damn television on. and it's incredible to see how these children are growing up with technology, but it's also scary because there's a lot of things, going on out there with technology that I don't think enough parents are paying attention to, and certainly no kids are. And I was kind of looking at, it was, you get that email across the wire or notifications on Twitter about the Amazon Look, which is, we couldn't figure out what it was at first, and it's like a vanity camera almost. It's
I've never even heard of it.
So it's this so everybody was making so Amazon introduced 2 things. One of them is the Look, and one of them is, I forget the name of the other one, but it's on their homepage. It's basically one of them is, it's an Echo, but it's an Echo with a screen so that you can actually see stuff on it when you ask it questions. But also you can't Skype with other people, but basically they have their own video conferencing software, so you can call other people with the app who also have it. But then there's the other thing called the Look, and I'm gonna actually look it up real quick because I want to make sure I don't get the 2 of them confused.
Yeah, because I knew about Alexa, and I know that Amazon had released a new sort of round of hardware things, but I just thought it was a more evolved sort of hardware to support Alexa to do more things.
No. So there's an Echo Look and there's an Echo Show. The Show is the one that I was talking about earlier. The Look is it's like this long lens camera. It's $200. It's like this long lens camera that doesn't really do a whole lot, but you can have it take photos of you, and it'll take photos from head to toe so you get the full body shot, and it'll take short videos so that you can basically pivot around, and then it sends it directly to your phone, and you look on your phone and it shows you what you look at all angles. And it even has like a built-in fashion assist, so it's going to like kind of tell you which of the 2 pieces of clothing looks best on you. And I couldn't tell at first if this was a parody or not because I couldn't believe that it was a real thing, but it is a real thing. It's a real device that they've basically geared towards an extremely specific niche of people who really care that much about what they look like in, when they go out from head to toe, when a normal mirror wouldn't suffice. And I look at something like that and I'm like, wow, like something like the Echo look in the hands of a teenager that gets hacked into. Could you,
Right.
I mean, we have problems now with, celebrity hacking where naked photos are being leaked online because people have hacked into their iClouds. If you have a camera that's sitting on your desk all the time, you could just be getting innocently changed, and suddenly all of those photos get hacked and get uploaded somewhere. And I know you have opinions because this is actually your episode, and you're probably going to know a lot more about some of the things going on in the news than me. But this idea that the Internet of Things is introducing, especially for children and even toddlers, because there's been some crazy stories about that, is introducing a way into our homes by outside nefarious forces. So what were you thinking on that? And I know you got a couple of pretty good examples that you've been looking at. What are your thoughts?
I think that, well, it's tough because I want to be an advocate of technology. I mean, I don't have to want to be, I am, but as always, you have to think like what is reasonable and rational, right? In terms of a thing. So my first thought is when I was a kid, and it was admonished even back then, is they called the TV the boob tube, with a babysitter, right? Like you put your kids in front of the television. I know my mom certainly did, and I would watch TV, and then I would be well behaved while watching TV because I would just get sucked right into it, and she could go and do the dishes or make dinner and not really worry. Like she'd make sure, pop her head out, make sure I haven't gotten up, but it was just a static thing, right? So there's no danger other than the fear of perhaps me becoming desensitized to violence or something. But again, really nothing as long as a parent steps in. Now, we live in an era, like you said, where your kids are intrinsically learning how to interact with technology, and it's so natural for them that they are doing it before they're even saying full sentences. And so there is a danger there to the children who don't know better. So it really, it's contingent upon parents to really educate themselves. Here's my opinion. Parents need to either really make the effort to understand how this technology works and what the dangers are, and I'll get to a couple examples in a minute, or don't use it. Like if you're only hearing the good things, like, oh, you have this, almost like an Alexa, right? Your kid can talk to their teddy bear, and the teddy bear can use like natural language processing and some AI on a cloud server somewhere to have unique interactions with them all the time.
Right.
And they can even have it for years, and it will evolve as they get older and a little bit more sophisticated. But the problem is that information is not kept in the home. So there was one toy, trying to get the name of the toy company, but so what had happened was there were photos and recordings and videos in these stuffed animals, and it was a hack, right? So it was an IoT, Internet of Things hack, and much like the ransomware thing, which has come up now in a couple episodes, the information was held by hackers. Says, we have this information. If you don't pay us, we're going to leak this information. And that is obviously terrifying because now it's information, it's pictures and data about your children. I can't imagine anything being more terrifying to a parent than that, right? And so, and of course, it's not bad parenting, right? I'm not pointing a finger at a parent saying you're a horrible parent, you didn't know better. It's tough to know because children are they have a much more natural relationship with technology now than the parents will.
Right.
And so that's why I'm saying it's really, really important for parents to understand, how does this work? If it's a smart toy, if it's an Internet of Things toy, and parents are right off the bat, and they should if you don't know what IoT is or Internet of Things, parents should get to know that means it's connected to the internet at all times. Constantly learning means it's sending data back to a server somewhere that is not yours, and possibly also your children run the risk of being subjected to advertising, which a lot of parents don't really like. So that was the one example with the stuffed toys. And the other thing was this data, apparently the company was using AWS. They were using Amazon's cloud server.
Right.
And somehow that got hacked. That's where the hack took place. So they got into the AWS cloud server and got the information. So it wasn't even they were hacking directly into the toy, although of course that is a possibility. But what they did was they got the data that came from those toys. And the other thing was, again, this happens with phones too. It's happened a couple years ago. What happens all the time, really, when you hear about your phones, is that information gets retained by the actual manufacturer of the electronic device and is sent back to the server. And the purpose of the information being sent back to the server, sent back to the manufacturer, is unknown. And that's what happened with a couple of, they almost look like, remember My Buddy from the 80s?
Yeah.
That's what they look like. They're like human dolls, right? These weren't like plush stuffed animals. These are like, little dolly toys, and like almost look like tween children. And there was information being collected about the usage, and that was being sent back to the manufacturer, and they got in trouble because why do you need this information? And so that was just another thing where, they would, the children would talk to the thing and it would kind of come up with, I guess, new ways to interact, right? It wasn't always like the same canned responses. And based on whatever the child, I guess, would talk about a lot, I guess they figured out a way to kind of make the doll interact in a way that's more attuned to that kid's interests. And metadata was being collected.
And even as far back as, I want to say 2014, 2015, I mean, we heard stories about internet connected. So like we have a baby monitor that's not connected to the internet. It's just two cameras, and then there's a device that connects directly to those two cameras. And so, I mean, sure, theoretically the device could be hacked to intercept that signal that's going back and forth, but it's not like it's an internet connected one where we can go onto our phone and log into the system and see from, I can't look at my children from work. So it's kind of an isolated, baby monitor. It's kind of in its own sandbox, so to speak. Not perfect, still a possibility of getting hacked, but it would require somebody actually hacking into a specific signal and being close enough to the house in order to do that.
Right.
But as far back as 2014, 2015, there were stories about internet connected baby monitors that people were hacking into. And there's been at least one story that I remember, but there might have been more stories where a hacker has hacked into the baby monitor and actually started talking to the baby, like, being basically creepy. And that's scary as a parent, because
that is super creepy, dude.
That's like,
it's really
straight out of a horror film. You think of something like that. Like anytime somebody, I lay my baby down, I go down and I'm washing dishes, and suddenly you hear some creepy voice, over the baby monitor that you have downstairs, talking to the baby, and they run in there. I mean, that's just straight out of, Hollywood horror films, and people are actually hacking into those things and saying things to babies, which is completely creepy, and parents aren't going to know any better. I mean, this is the device where you're dependent on the manufacturer to have the appropriate security setup, have the appropriate firmware in order to not be able to allow these hackers to intrude in it. And that's, like I said, I've said before in a previous podcast that how many people update their, their modem firmware, how many update their router firmware. Not many people do that. I can guarantee you nobody on my block has ever updated their router firmware in the life of the entire router. They just use it till it goes dead, and then that's it.
My wife doesn't even update. Like, sometimes she'll give me her phone, like, I can't, I'm out of space, or can you fix this thing? And I'll notice, like, she's got Google alerts, not alerts, but like the little thing, like she's got like 30 apps that need to be updated. Maybe that doesn't matter, but some of them might be security updates. You know what I mean? Like, this app needs to be updated for security reasons. She doesn't even it just doesn't register to her. Like, it's almost like an annoyance, right? That she ignores.
And that's important, because that's how a lot of those update. I mean, as soon as something gets hacked and it gets out there, they try to push an update. So if you're not updating your phone right, and I mean, now they've been sending emails along with it, like, yeah, we're sending this because you actually have something insecure, and we need you to patch that in a hurry. I mean, at least they're being a little more prompt with why you need to upgrade, but it still doesn't mean that people are going to do it. Your mother's liable to not do it. Your grandmother's not going to do it. You're going to end up having to go in there and do it for them. And when you a computer is easy to update, because, hey, look, here's a notification. I just click this button and it's going to update. A phone is easy to update. How do you update the firmware on a baby monitor? How do you update the firmware in a toy that's internet connected and doing creepy things? Any of those, Internet of Things devices are liable to not be frictionless. And then you have to trust that these manufacturers are going to start pushing automatic updates to your devices over your Wi-Fi, and that process isn't somehow going to get blocked or screwed up. There's a lot of I mean, Internet of Things is new and everybody's kind of pushing out their internet connected device. I don't know if people have fully thought through, especially parents have fully thought through the consequences of what these things can do. And I'm going to pull us back into the actual internet. And I might have told this story before, so I'll be brief with it. If you look at teenagers today and how they handle things on Facebook, you look at, like, my wife's cousin who lives down the road. All of them have Facebook accounts. All of them take photos with their camera, and none of them. I mean, most of their stuff is not private. It's all public. It's all publicly posted photos, and you're a bunch of teenagers walking up down the street. There could be any creepy person here who has any sort of ability with a computer can look up your Facebook page because they can find you based on your name and based on your location, because Facebook is fantastic about giving you all of these options to search for people. And then you find that teenager on the internet, and oh, look, here's a photo from their camera, which they probably have location turned on, and the camera embeds the location information into the photo. I know now where you live. I know where you hang out at. I know what pictures you post most often. That's with modern internet technology that people are supposed to know to be safe.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the Internet of Things?
It is. And here's the thing. It isn't even just necessarily older, creepy people. It's also bullying. That makes children more accessible to bullies who they cannot even physically or even electronically, or however you want to describe that, like cybernetically or something. We have to come up with a term to describe like your presence on the internet, but they can't get away from bullies anywhere. You know what I mean? So now they could be badgered by an internet mob, and their presence is known. And that's another aspect of this sort of Internet of Things, with whether it be our phone or toys for babies or whatever electronic devices for teenagers, is that it exposes them.
Absolutely.
And I don't mean to, that sounds very ominous, and I'm not trying to be, inject a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but it is definitely something parents have to be aware of.
Their devices, these things are so new because people are building internet connected things for no apparent reason, because you can. So these things are so new, and there's so much still up in the air about them as far as, what they're good for, how accurate they are. But there's a lot of naivety over the ability of technology based on the marketing that's sold. So like when it comes to a criminal case, there's the CSI effect, where a lot of jurors are expecting the prosecution to put forth a case as far as evidence goes, as clear cut as they do on episodes of CSI. Well, CSI is a science fiction show.
Absolutely.
A lot of what's on there does not exist, but people have watched it as this is what people do in order to solve crimes. And so as a juror, it's been harder to actually prove criminal cases because of the CSI effect. Well, there's a technological effect too. This idea that because technology is marketed in a certain way, it solves that problem. And I'll give you an example. And this example comes from a woman in Charlottesville, Emily Gorchensky, who is a very smart computational mathematician, and she's been doing a lot of talks recently about IoT and ethics. And she had a blog post where she was talking about the dangers of IoT, and that there was a woman who was sexually assaulted, and she happened to have like a Fitbit or some other fitness tracking device on her arm. And the defense actually used the readout of that device, because of the data that was on it, to try to say that she was not sexually assaulted because her health statistics did not change. And what Emily Gorchensky was able to do was she was able to show with a chicken breast, she was able to put a health tracking device onto a chicken breast and stimulate the heartbeat up to 120 beats per minute, I think the number was. So she was able to show you how with a dead piece of meat, you could fake the data in this thing. But prosecutors and defense and maybe even juries are taking things as gospel that, hey, this is a fitness tracker. It's going to track my heartbeat. This is accurate, at least to within a certain degree. And if that starts being used as evidence in court cases, when we know how faulty a lot of us could be based on skin conductance, based on how you even wear the device. I mean, that's dangerous, and that shows the naivety of new technology, especially the adoption of it.
Right, because technology is fallible. And as technologists and especially developers, we know that. We live that. But if a lot of people, they're going to think, oh, well, they're not going to put it on the mass market if it's not doesn't work perfectly. So people, parents will just think, oh, I have no reason to worry that this internet connected little teddy bear is any real threat. It can be. It's not a threat, but there are possibilities that you just have to be aware of. Now, here's an interesting thing. You've got things like hackers and you've got things like bullies and you've got things like information being shared with corporations that you necessarily don't want. Those aren't great. But you've also got another thing, and this is interesting. So Mattel this summer is going to release their thing called Aristotle, which is a baby monitor kind of AI thing. Apparently Microsoft is involved in making it. So they're going to use Microsoft's AI stuff, and that's great. But it raises an interesting thing. So if you have, and this is one of those things I think where it's supposed to scale with the kid, right? So they can, as they get older, they can interact with it and ask it things. And I was looking for the press. Okay, right. Yeah. So the byline is Aristotle was specifically designed to grow up with a child. Now that's great. And that's what I was referring to earlier. They present an interesting thing in this article, though, and you see it in other places too, not just one article, is what happens when a child's primary interaction is with a machine. Right. They aren't being a couple things, right? There's the risk of them losing that natural curiosity. Term you used to use all the time was, what was it, 2-second Googlers? Yeah, it's an old right. People who instead of satisfying a natural curiosity to learn on their own, they just go get the answer right away. And if a child, what happens to a kid who just grows up with like factual intelligence is the term that they use in the article, where they just give facts and they don't have wonder. Let's not take away of all the benefits technology can give us. Let's not lose our ability to wonder and imagine. So
for those who don't know what we're talking about, I think it was 3-second Googler. So yeah. Bill and I used to have conversations about arguments had with other people on the internet, and
a long time ago. This is a term you used, like a decade ago or something?
This was probably about a decade ago. Is you used to have a discussion with somebody on the internet, and no matter what you would say in trying to keep this concise argument together, they would go and find information to the contrary and basically put it in there. No matter what you say, they always had an answer, and we referred to it as, I think, 3-second Googlers, because basically they would see what you had to say, and rather than constructing their own opinion, they would go and research something real quick that reinforced their own opinion or their own thoughts on it, and then put that in there, and kind of that's where that term came from. Now, you posted an article to our OneNote, which is where we share this stuff about. It's from the Washington Post, and it kind of fits along the lines of what you were saying before I so rudely interrupted you, which was how millions of kids are being shaped by know-it-all voice assistants. And I took a look at this article, and I thought it was rather intriguing. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know where I am on the fence on this, but it talks about children's interactions with disembodied voices, and some of the concerns over. Well, one, there's the psychological interest in how will children treat these non-human entities, and how they interact and work with these non-human entities, especially as or at least the voice recognition and the responses become more and more human-like. And then, of course, the other concern, and I think this was it mentions Aristotle in this article, so I don't know whether that's where you got it or if you got it from a different article. But where it starts talking about the interpersonal skills and whether or not children are losing interpersonal skills because rather than doing that exploring like you talked about, they're simply asking this device. And I don't know where I fit on it, because I view these devices as almost they're certainly enabling. The device is not going to cook your meal for you. You're going to have to learn how to cook that meal. So you still have to do something, but the device might show you, or at least be able to inform you of a number of recipes in which you can try. I don't. So I see it as certainly helping children grow to a certain extent, and I'm interested to see what the argument is against the use of these, other than the security concerns. Because again, like you said, the boob tube, children were sat right in front of a television. That wasn't even a learning device. It was like, here, watch this, endless loop of stuff that was probably inappropriate for you to begin with. Unless
Bugs Bunny and commercials,
Right. Bugs Bunny, which had many racist cartoons, especially, 10, 20 years ago. Commercials, which, when we grew up, commercials had all kinds of crazy stuff stuff in there. It definitely wasn't as restrained as it is today. I marvel at the fact that when I put in Disney films, if the Disney film had a character in it, older Disney film had a character in it that smoked, there's a warning before before the movie plays about how dangerous smoking is and it causes cancer. But back then, I never even thought about that. Oh, look, here's a cartoon character that's smoking. So we've clearly, as a society, we're kind of moving to that point to where we're coming more and more PC. But back when you and I were growing up, we had less supervision, but we had less access to information. We were required to explore and to learn and to hurt ourselves, falling off of things in order to find out more information. These things offer knowledge first, and then from that knowledge, you can then experiment in the areas that you wish to experiment. So I don't know how I feel quite about the pushback.
Right. You lead right nicely into how I was going to try and get into wrapping up the segment, which is basically we've said a lot of the dangers of having devices that are smarter, that give our children access to instant information. And then, of course, the perils of being always connected to the internet and that not necessarily being just a one-way device. People can get in. But let me ask you, so in light of all the things that we said that are potential risks, what comes to mind that is like a really great benefit of these? And you sort of started to touch on it already a little bit there. The benefits of having these sort of always online sort of toys and devices that could help kids.
Oh, I think there's huge benefits to it. There are skill sets which, for example, my children like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which of course comes from the Mr. Rogers people, and that's available everywhere thanks to the PBS app, thanks to, so you can watch it on YouTube, you can watch it on your Xbox through PBS, you can watch it through Amazon, you could watch it on the internet, you could have one of the Amazon skills, play the audio of an episode. There is a lot of educational information available for children and for adults. And, Heather doesn't think our kids are going to have cell phones, and she doesn't think that they're going to have tablets or anything at such a young age. And I kind of see it as inevitable, because it's not the device, it's the content on the device. So, right. If my kid's 5 years old and they have a tablet, but on that tablet is an app that's a Starfinder app, and so it encourages them to look up at the stars and kind of position the app, and it shows them what the constellations would look like if they were drawn like we see them, when their actual figures are drawn out, and that makes them more interested in space. And so then they want a Celeron telescope, and so we get the telescope and they can look at the stars closer, and that encourages them to want to learn more about space. I'm all for that.
Hey, is that an actual app? Like, I didn't even, but like, where you, like a mixed reality thing on your phone where you can hold your phone up to a constellation, it'll draw the dots.
I think iOS had one a very long time ago. I don't know if it still does.
That would be awesome.
So it would actually show show you the stars, but also overlay the actual image. So like the Orion would look like the actual figure Orion, and not just the belts and the lines. And then there's other ones that actually will offer the lines in addition to the stars instead of the actual image. So there's things like that which to me are very important. The Leaf Finder app from now it kind of stinks, but the Leaf Finder app from the Smithsonian, as technology develops and gets better, this idea that you can just snap a photo of a leaf and it can tell you everything you need to know about the tree. Those things to me are important. And we've seen the benefit with cell phones. We've seen the benefits with tablets. We've seen the benefits with the internet on a computer. I don't know if we've quite found the benefit through internet-connected toys, other than allowing you to maybe monitor certain information. I don't know if we found the benefit for things like Cortana or Siri or even the Amazon Echo, because I think it's so new that it hasn't evolved. Right now, it's part of the hype cycle, and it's part of the get everything out and throw it all against the wall and see who will buy it. But as that starts to die down, the places that will survive will be the places that actually have offered value. And the things that offer value, I think, will offer, especially for children, will be the educational aspect of things. But who knows? What are your thoughts?
I think that there are far more benefits than potential danger. Like I said, because the danger is largely mitigated by, as a parent, just knowing knowing what the thing does and knowing how to safeguard, doing firmware updates or not buying something that's, like say a cheap knockoff version because they might not even have updates. They might be subject to a security risk out of the box and the company is just some crappy little, whatever you call a company that just like makes cheaply manufactured stuff. Like it's, caveat emptor, same as it always was. If you're not careful about what you buy, it could cause damage. And I think that there is, much to your point, there's so many ways that technology can be used as tools to not undercut discovery by like observing the natural world, but by enhancing it.
Right.
And the other thing too, I think, and I don't even know if this is just me sort of just wondering, but if you have a child who grows up and they're interacting with a sort of like, a machine, they're going to know it's a machine, but they're going to develop a personal relationship with it because that's what we do as human beings. That's how we project. But my hope is, this is my hope, and I think it's a very real possibility, is that there's going to be this point where children growing up aren't going to develop biases about people that are different because they're starting their primary interactions is with a sort of neutral area, right? And it could go either way, I guess. But I just sort of feel like a machine is going to be built not to have biases, and it won't impart those biases on the children. So they're not going to grow up and take those out into the world with them, and I'm speaking specifically about, homophobia, racism, sexism. Like these kids might have machines that even in some way expose them to, we don't have that kind of stuff in commercial products, so it's not going to be present. So they're not going to be exposed to it. That's to me, that's like a hopeful benefit that in some way the technology helps kind of like push some of that bias stuff, that generational bias, that environmental bias, and they just kind of come to the world with a more clean and unhampered view of things. Oh yeah, everybody's different, and because you know what I mean. I don't know how to say it.
No, I'm just kind of get it. I get what you mean.
Maybe you can articulate it better, but that's one of the things that I hope, that is through interacting with machines, it doesn't necessarily create a lack of interpersonal skills, but what it does do is it just gives a little bit of a reset. Like, growing up, I grew up in an area that was all white kids. I wasn't exposed a lot to people of color. All of my friends growing up were young white boys, right? And we didn't grow up to be racists, but that's just because we weren't, right? So I was exposed to kids. Who knows? So I could grow up somewhere where there's just all racism, and it was just so normalized that it never even occurred to me. And that's, of course, I mean to get political, but that's what happens. When racism, and we talk about institutional racism, that's what we mean. These things are they're normalized even before a point where a child even understands right from wrong. So if you're dealing with a machine who isn't going to expose them to that stuff, when they get old enough, they might realize, well, that's not right.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
that exposure is good in several ways. So for example, when children first learn to talk or to articulate the things that they want, a lot of what they learn is they learn it through you reading to them, and you reading to them nursery rhymes or Aesop's fables. There is a repetition and a rhythm to what you were telling them, and they recognize the repetition and the rhythm in order to repeat it. Your children will listen to, what I bring up Disney films because we have a lot of Disney films, but they hear the songs and they try to repeat the songs. My son isn't as communicative as my daughter is at their age because her speech is developed much, much more faster than his, but he will get up when You're Welcome comes on for Moana, and he will try to sing with it, and he's developing his speech patterns and he's recognizing what's going on. These devices, the tablets require touch input, so they're learning fine motor skills to a certain extent. It's not as good as playing with different shaped and colored blocks, but it's still fine motor skills. And when it comes to things like Amazon and Siri and Cortana, you're looking at things that require a certain form of articulation in order to get the information you want. And at a young age, they're going to learn that articulation, and they're going to learn how to communicate and interface with a device in order to acquire information or acquire real life skills. And I think that's very important. I don't think it opens them up to knowledge. It opens them up to diversity, and it opens them up to forms of communication, forms of effective communication, and I think that's important. I want to leave you with this before we go off the air, even though this is a podcast and we're not technically on the air. So one of the things when you started talking about some of these items, it sparked in my brain about a programmable bracelet. And I forgot what it was called, but I was able to look it up real quick, and it's called Jewelbots, JEWELBOTS.com. And the tagline is "Code Like a Girl." And basically, these are open source wearable devices that can be programmed. Basically, it uses Arduino. It's supposed to be 100% safe for kids. There's no GPS or anything like that. It has a very robust online community, and they're relatively inexpensive. I don't see the pricing on here, but from what I remember last time I looked, they're relatively inexpensive.
$69 for one. You can get 100, and for two, it's 109 and 139 for three.
There you go, and you can buy them in bulk. A lot of technology places have been buying them in bulk and handing them off to like code academies or code camps for youngsters. And basically, this is a device that, look, your child has been introduced to technology at a very early age: iPads, iPhones, a Cortana, Xbox, things like that. Well, here's the opportunity to them to take something that's wearable. So this goes towards, catering towards females, trying to get them into STEM, trying to get them into programming, into technology. Breaking down the barriers between, the whole programmer thing with men. So it gives them the opportunity to work on something relatively, nice and fashionable, but that requires some form of technological innovation. And I think it's a fantastic project. I don't know if it was on Kickstarter or not, but it's a fantastic project. And I think it represents kind of the epitome of what we're talking about, in that there are issues with security. There are issues with IoT toys as far as not having a clear focus on value. There are obviously problems with IoT, just like there's problems with any technology. But if you can take that and shape that and add value and introduce knowledge to anybody, whether it's girls or boys or whomever, that's part of the value. And I think we need to grow in that direction rather than, constantly being in fear and trying to, shut every piece of technology down.
Right. I agree. I think it's great. So as you mentioned, I went and looked it up until I got the price, but this looks really cool. It's neat. It's simple.
It is. And that's part of the beauty of it, is the simplicity in it. So, I mean, if you're looking for good IoT, if you're looking for, obviously this is not I don't think this is an internet connected device. Explicitly, obviously there's no GPS in it, but if you're looking for the ways that technology can advance, can advance knowledge, especially new forms of technology, this is something to take a look at, something to hopefully calm people's nerves after they read that article about the baby monitor being hacked and people saying creepy stuff to the babies in the cribs.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, and this is the great benefit of where we see the push towards more people, like you said, STEM, people getting involved in science and technologies, engineering and math, is that you'll have a lot of these open source projects, and with 3D printing, they'll be able to not only write the code, they'll be able to build the devices that will run the code and that will empower them more, instead of waiting for a corporation to give them something that may or may not have more nefarious means that you can't control. And that's great. It's a great thing. And I think that children being exposed to the technology, this is my opinion. With children being exposed to technology, how old should they be before they get a laptop, a phone, a tablet, or whatever? I think as mileage may vary, parents are going to know when their kids are ready for it. But I think as soon as your kid is capable of just be able to hold it and interpret the interactions, I don't think, you want to maybe moderate it, of course, you make that decision on your own, but I don't think technology is some evil thing that children should be kept away from for as long as possible, because God forbid they know what an iPad is before they've touched a tree. I don't think that that's a big deal. If you're not letting them outside to touch trees, that's your, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think as soon as they are capable to interact with it in a meaningful way, then that's a good time for them, because they're going to grow up with this stuff. And the sooner they can get a handle on it, the better, because they're going to be the ones who are shaping it in the future.
Absolutely. So parents out there, go tell your children to hook up the internet connected refrigerator and go to iTunes or Google Play to please drop us a review. You people have been slacking. We'd like to get a couple of reviews in there so we can get this podcast up in the rankings. It brings in more listeners. We have fun even with the listeners that we have, but it's always welcome to have more. And we thank you guys for listening. I know we get some pretty good feedback. Mostly they contact me because I'm the one that posts it onto Twitter, but our Facebook page is growing. mean, our downloads have been growing. It's been fantastic. I want to remind you that we have a newsletter on the website. I haven't sent out any newsletters yet because we're waiting to acquire a much lengthier list. It'll be some information on the website, information about the podcast. We'll put in a few tidbits of our own as we continue to ramp this up. It's been a year, actually, that we've been doing this podcast, which is fantastic that we've been going on for this long. And we've said,
is it officially a year?
We launched our first episode in May of last year. So
wow.
This is the second episode that we're recording here in May. So it's been roughly a year that we've been putting out stuff. So
nice. Happy birthday.
I was going to say happy anniversary. Yours is a little less creepy. All right. We'll talk to you guys later.
Take care, everybody.
That's it for this episode of Codepunk. You can subscribe to this podcast on Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher, or listen to it on the web at codepunk.io. You can find Bill on Twitter at Norathustra and Michael on Twitter at Zool.